ready then?
Yep.
Okay. Everyone, once these people sit down, I guess I'll be ready.
Yeah. Nope. Nope. No, 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 no. No. Yeah, no. Hey, Tyler, want me to find a darker marker?
We tried. There is no darker marker. We're gonna announce it, and then people watching on the live stream will have it on there as a graphic.
All right, I'm ready to start if they are. I assume CTV is ready.
Tell everyone.
All right, everybody, we're going to get ready to start here. All right. To start off, I'm your moderator tonight. My name's Ryan Christ. I work for CTV. And the format of this will be, of course, the Speaker of the Senate campaigns. There will be roughly 10 questions. The first question will be presented to both of you, and then the rest of the questions will be distributed randomly, and you may have the chance to do a rebuttal based on me and Tyler's decisions. And if you guys would like to send in audience questions, go to debatequestions18@gmail.com. All right, let's get started. The first question will be for Ben. What do you want people to know about your campaign?
Yeah, one big thing that our campaign did is we raised up a normal campaign. We were planning on giving people free food, planning on giving them free pens with our logo on it, and doing a lot of stuff like that. And it would have looked like a normal campaign. Over this spring break, I got the privilege of serving in Texas and helping out Hurricane Harvey victims rebuild their homes. There was a single mother who hasn't been in her home for 7 months. We got to bring her back into her home, and that's something that was awesome. But I also felt some conviction, and I believed that we're about to spend all of this money on, giving people pens with my name on it. There's better places that it could go. So something our campaign did is we donated all of our campaign money, as in every single penny. Like, my bank account is at 0 right now. Eating ramen noodles in my dorm. We gave it all away to Hurricane Harvey victims to help them out. And it's just this idea of cultivating compassion that too often we talk about, what can people do for me? I know John F. Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. The same way, even in our student government, ask not, what can this student government give me, but how can I serve and help other people?
Thank you. The same question will be presented to Maral. What do you want people to know about your campaign?
I think the foremost thing that I would like people to know about my campaign is that I don't believe in giving people a voice, but rather creating the space where they're allowed to speak for themselves, where their space is safe and comfortable, to where they can talk about issues that are under-highlighted and that exist in often silenced and marginalized communities and sub-communities within our campus, and also the fact that really coming together in community around the idea that we may all have different beliefs, but we have to have faith in each other to be able to do the good work and represent our students and be able to give back. So,
thank you. Next question is for Ben. What changes would you like to implement in the Senate?
This is not as much of a specific one that would be policy-based, but it's more of just a cultural change that I would encourage. I think a lot of times our dialogue is focused not on solutions, but rather on problems that are happening around campus. I've shared this before, but I have a friend in the Air Force, and he had a policy from his commanding officer that you can never propose a problem without also offering a solution. And I think one way we can change the culture of our Senate, it's important to know the needs and desires and wants of students around campus, but it's equally important to talk about solutions to those problems rather than just talking about essentially what's happening. So we have to have those solutions, and having that solution-oriented dialogue. I know as Speaker of the Senate, you have a huge stance and a lot with setting the agenda and just focusing where's that conversation going to go. I want to allow free speech and that anyone can say anything in the Senate, but we should be focusing on solutions. And I think we're going to solve a lot more problems when we start talking about how do we solve this, not necessarily why is this broken, or not necessarily that this is broken, etc.
Thank you. The next question is for Maral. How will you withhold your own political beliefs during Senate meetings?
So in my current role as senator, I get the privilege of being able to take a stance and use my vote towards issues that I'm passionate about and the issues that my constituents bring forward to me, and particularly have the privilege of being able to highlight issues that exist within under-highlighted and underserved communities. But in transferring to a role of speaker, I think I have been able to gain experience in being the founder of the first ever ASCSU's Women's Caucus, and the third in these United States to my current knowledge and research. But I have been able to gain the experience of being able to put myself in a position of being moderator as the chairwoman of this newly created committee. And in that role, I've been able to step back from being able to speak for my own identity and work on creating the space for all sorts of different identities to be able to exist and find safe space within our caucus, and being able to find community and build political networks to where we can empower each other to be able to speak on the things that might not be comfortable to speak on in our current culture within the Senate. So I think that would be one of my biggest agendas, is really to be able to build that space to where everybody else has the opportunity to speak up in ways that I and the constituents that I serve have not been allowed to formerly in the culture in our Senate and on campus in general, but really to be able to create this space, because we have a beautiful quote in the middle of our campus that says, "If I was able to see farther than others, it is only because I stood on the shoulders of giants," and people have paved the way for me, so I feel the opportunity and I feel the responsibility to have to pave the way for other people to be able to speak up in a way that I wasn't able to before.
Thank you. Next question will be for Ben. How will you make sure senators are not pushing their own political views when discussing bills in the Senate?
I won't. People can share their political views if you are a senator. I think we have this idea that no one should ever feel uncomfortable or no one should ever disagree with me. It's just a fact of life that there are people out there who have beliefs that are offensive and appalling to me, and I'm not going to say we can't have these ideas. I believe in intellectual safety. What does that mean? That means that you might not necessarily feel 100% comfortable all the time, but we can encourage dialogue that can grow us, and we can protect your ideas. That even if you have an idea that people aren't on board with, we're going to protect that, and we're going to say that you have the right to talk about your political beliefs and ideas, and in doing so, you're going to represent students all along campus who also have those shared ideas.
Thank you. Maral, I'm going to open up a rebuttal to that question for you. If you'd like me to repeat the question, it is, how will you make sure senators are not pushing their own political views when discussing bills in the Senate?
So my biggest priority with that would be to try to facilitate an environment within Senate and moderate an environment where we have really bipartisan opinions available, and that we're mostly focusing on representing our students and bringing forth all of the experiences that they have and the shoes that they walk in when they go through campus and the experience that they go through, and be able to leave our own personal politics at the door. Because I don't think that it is appropriate for senators to bring their personal agendas, because the job of senators is to be able to advocate on behalf of their entire constituency. And in my experience, sitting in the seat of an SDPS officer and a senator, I am responsible for answering to 33,198 constituents. So if I came in there and I used my time to push my own personal views, or if in my potential role as speaker allowed other people to push their personal views, I don't think that we would be facilitating a bipartisan environment that focuses on students.
Thank you. Next question is for Ben. How would you exactly inform the student body about what is happening in the Senate?
Yeah, one thing about that is that I would make sure that our website 100% of the time is up to date and having the recent legislation that we're talking about. I went to our website a few days ago, I clicked on recent bills, and it wouldn't go to anywhere. So that's one thing I would fix immediately. I'd say people should be able to go online and see that. Another thing I really believe in is tabling on the plaza and saying, if you have a bill idea, walk up to this table and tell us. We'll do all the paperwork, all the legislative bureaucracy that gets so difficult, and getting through all that red tape, etc. You just tell me your idea, and we're going to push that for you.
Thank you. Maral, the next question is for you. What would you do to improve Senate's image both inside and outside the organization?
Will you come back with that? Sorry.
No problem. What would you do to improve Senate's image both inside and outside of the organization?
So I think ASCSU and Senate's image is a reflection of the work that we're doing. And I think that in the past year, we've had a lot of issues with our internal culture, and that has obstructed our ability to focus on external legislation that gives tangible resources and tangible programs back to our students. And I think that we've had an issue in the past with focusing a lot on internal legislation, and so I think being able to transfer from focusing internally to an external focus, and the big remedy to the current reputation of Senate and ASCSU is having people know that they have senators, having events and ideas where we can have people come and meet their senators and realize that they have people that represent them and that they do have a voice in a greater conversation, and that they can be able to connect with those people. When I came into Senate, I didn't even know that it was within my reach to be able to get involved, or within my reach to be able to speak up to people who were involved and talk about the issues that I saw on my campus. So really to be able to create and facilitate an environment where we can do tangible work that is focused on connecting students with all the wonderful resources that already exist, and addressing the resources that do still need to be created based on student fee dollars that they're already paying. I think the biggest way to be able to remedy our current reputation is by doing the work and giving back to students.
Thank you. Ben, I'm going to allow you to comment on that, so same question.
Okay, so I actually, there was, just on the views of the Senate, there was an article written about me for Speaker of the Senate. Is Natalia here by chance? Natalia for the Collegian? Okay, you're right. Yeah, I literally sent that article to my mom. It was incredible. Like, you wrote it so positively about me. I was like, Mom, this is my campaign right here. I think changing the views of the Senate, sometimes we overcomplicate it. I think it's simple. I just sat down with Natalia, and we just had a conversation, and we were laughing. I offered to buy her coffee. It was really good. I think we overcomplicate it. I think sometimes we just have to sit down with the Collegian and say, hey, how's your day going? And then they'll start writing articles that reflect us a lot better, because they'll see that we're real people with real cares, real beliefs, and they'll start to understand us better once we just simplify it, just be their friend.
Thank you. Next question is from Maral. Why do you believe Senate has so much difficulty with turning away from internal focus? And briefly explain how you would institute change.
So I think the biggest framework and the biggest mentality that we need to bring into our office and really stress is a foremost platform of empathy. And senators serve in the capacity of servant leaders, but the most important thing about that is that we're servants first and leaders second. And I think a lot of the time we focus on our internal agendas and our internal constitution and our internal pieces of legislation that ultimately end up in a file cabinet, because it helps a lot of people pad their resume. And I think being able to have students hold their senators and their representatives accountable through like programs that I have already started to pilot a framework for, which are like suggestion box, both physically in the office and on our website, where we can post up our agenda every single week and have students be able to come directly to our page and keep our online presence up and updated, and have students be able to send in their feedback and make it a part of every senator's office hours to have to check the feedback of their college and all of their constituents before we go into Senate and talk about it and address our agenda, rather than having students have to hear about it in the Collegian the day afterwards, after we've already voted on things. But to be able to bring students in and have them be a part of the process and have them hold their representatives accountable, I think will be the biggest remedy to this culture.
Thank you. The next question is for Ben. This is an audience question. What can you bring to the position that your opponent cannot?
Good question. I think if you went down the list, Maral Sharif and I mean, we could both list off all of the things that we've done since we've been at CSU. You're a sophomore, correct? Yeah. I'm a freshman, so I think we could list off all of those things. I've shared this proverb before, but there's a proverb that says, he who is faithful in the little should be trusted with a lot. And what that means is that in those small circumstances where people don't think it matters, if you power through and you do a good job there, you deserve to have a good job with the bigger picture, bigger things out there. And so I think what you'll find with me is there's not going to be a person who will show up earlier, leave later, who's going to work harder for that position. There's not a single job in this world that's beneath me. And I think you'll find that I have a hard work ethic, and I really believe in getting stuff done and following my beliefs and my convictions.
Thank you. Morala, I'm going to give you a rebuttal for this one, so you may comment on the same question.
Okay, so I think what I bring to the table is really just my dedication to servant leadership and to student government on campus. I have the honor of serving as the Power Chair this year in the Senate. I also am the senator currently serving for the Women and Gender Advocacy Center, representing 33,198 constituents. I get to use parliamentary procedure in vice chairing the University Issues Committee. I get to serve as the vice president for the Multi-Faith and Belief Council. I get to serve as the health network liaison on the Student Fee Review Board, and really be able to take advantage of every program and resource that we have on campus and understand how I can translate those and how I can connect our constituents to them. And really, above all of that, I make time to be able to speak with my constituents, and I definitely put their agendas and their needs before my own when I speak, and I think that's probably the biggest thing that I can bring.
Thank you. Ben, the next question is for you. What changes would you make to how Senate recruits members to encourage a greater diversity of voices?
I think, first off, I think the fact that anyone can join Senate is a huge thing that we don't talk about enough. Anyone can walk through those doors and run for a Senate position. So it's one of those things where there's not a lot of barring against students from getting in there. How am I going to get more people in? I think we can just be out in the plaza talking to people more about it. Sometimes, once again, I think we overcomplicate almost everything we do, especially in the Senate. We have all these fancy procedures, etc. I would buy a pizza and I'd say, hey, there's free pizza if you come into the ASCSU office today. People will come in, and guarantee we're going to get people joining from that. I know recruitment and retention was incredibly successful this year. We had people sitting in the gallery, senators sitting in the gallery, because there just wasn't enough room. And so I think recruitment and retention is pretty successful, but I'm sure buying a pizza can pull a decent audience our way.
Thank you. Well, the next question is for you. If elected, what changes would you make to the structure of the Senate leadership team?
So I think if potentially honored with being elected to Speaker of the Senate, the changes that I would want to push to make within our leadership team is to make sure that we are continuing to internally elect our leadership team rather than the idea and the framework of appointing them, because that just allows for all of our leadership team and our committee chairs and our recruitment and retention officer to all come from different schools of thought and different communities on our campus, and that way that we can make our leadership team as diverse as possible, and in that way we can have a discussion where we don't all agree and we have different perspectives and we have different levels of passion in the room, and in that way Senate can hold their leadership team accountable, because if we have all people who are appointed internally, then we all have people from one, it'll be most likely that we have people from one school of thought, and in that way they would be able to stand together and not be able to be checked and balanced by the Senate. So I think my foremost priority would be trying to create a diverse team where we can have Senate still be able to work together and balance their leadership team.
Thank you. I'd like to offer the rebuttal to Ben if you'd like to comment on the same question.
Yeah, I think Maral Sharif, that was a good point about how we should have that diversity of ideas, but I think you're kind of making it into an either-or. Either it's appointed or it's approved by the Senate, and actually the framework that I'm working on right now is that it would be both. And so I talked to Isabel Brown, who's the current Speaker of the Senate right now. She said her leadership team was great, but they just didn't get along early on, or it wasn't necessarily that they had problems, but it was that they weren't communicating well. They weren't a team that was designed to be together. So what I would make it happen is I'd have it appointed by leadership. So people are saying this is a team that's going to work well together, and then I'd have it ratified, approved by the Senate. So it would be a two-step process in order to have that happen. I don't think it's an either-or. I think we can make sure the Senate has a voice in it, and it's also appointed to have a collaborative team that's successful, well-driven. And I think that's the best way to have leadership in the Senate.
Thank you. Maral, I'm going to circle back to a question that I gave to Ben. What changes would you make to how Senate recruits members to encourage a greater diversity of voices?
So I think to encourage a greater diversity of voices, I have already started a passion project in creating the first ever women's caucus at ASCSU and at CSU, and the third in the nation currently in universities. But I think to be able to create spaces where we highlight groups that are often underserved and silenced, and be able to allow people to know that they can get involved and that they have a space to speak up. And I think one of my priorities would be to build a time into our Senate agenda that's just real talk, that has no formal language or no parliamentary procedure, and it's just a space where people can talk about things that are uncomfortable. People can bring forth, the conversations that they've had with their constituents, or the things that their constituents have brought to them, and be able to address things that often don't fit within a scheduled agenda under parliamentary procedure, but to be able to open up that time. And we've done that this year, and been able to have a wonderful conversation and address the bias-motivated incidences, and be able to take a stand as an organization, a representation of the students, and say that we will have no tolerance for this, and that we are going to make time to speak up for it, even if it isn't in our agenda. So I think that would be one of my biggest things, is to try and build that real talk time into our agenda, as well as being able to do things like hold an open house and let people know that they have senators and that their student government exists, and that they can very easily communicate with their student government and can get involved. Because up until last August, I didn't know that I could get involved on campus. I didn't think that being in student government was within my reach, because I'm a pre-medical student. I thought that you had to be pre-law, and I thought that you had to have these connections to get in and to be able to give back to your campus, but you really don't. So just letting people know that we have time and space for them, even during gallery input, for them to be able to come and speak their mind and speak authentically on their experiences, rather than having other people speak for them. I think that's the way where we can be able to recruit the most diverse team.
Thank you. Next question is for Ben. What do you want out of the next leaders of the judicial and executive branches next year?
What do I want out of them? Was that
Yes.
the question?
Yes, it is.
Well, I want them elected by the students. I'm not looking for something specifically. No matter what, I want to work well, and I want to have a collaborative effort between us. But I also believe there should be a balance of power. I don't think that just because an executive says this is where we're going, or a judicial says something specifically, I don't think that that's going to point us in a single direction. So I think there is a balance of power between the legislative and these other branches. I'm really in the boat where whatever I'm handed, we're going to work with it, and we're going to go forward with it. I'm not going to necessarily specify this is who I want, or this candidate, or they have to look like this, or do this, etc. Just whatever we're given, we're going to roll with it.
Thank you. Moral, I'm going to offer you the chance for a rebuttal. Same question.
Okay, so I think as far as holding our executive and judicial teams accountable to the students, the biggest thing that I would work on is being able to schedule regular roundtable discussions where we have time for students to be in the same room with other servant leaders that work on other student organizations, and their government representatives to be able to be in the same room, and once a week or every 2 weeks be able to focus on a particular incident, be able to say this roundtable is open to people who have experienced or are passionate about the bias-motivated incidences on campus. And in that way, we create the space where we can have an intimate conversation, and we can link representatives with students who have been directly affected by the unfortunate incidences that have occurred on our campus. And in that way, we create the space for them to be able to speak and really humanize the situation, because in that way we're able to allow it to resonate, and then we're able to cultivate the passion to start to remedy those things and advocate on behalf of those incidences.
Thank you. Next question is for Ben. What are your ideas for managing the Senate and/or running effective meetings?
I think part of it is encouraging any dialogue and any speech that people might have in Senate meetings. I think a lot of us are afraid of ideas and afraid of beliefs. Here's what I've learned. There was an incident in my residence hall where someone said a remark that was pretty appalling, and the RA started yelling at him to rebuke him. And I think a lot of people are being trained nowadays that if you disagree with something, it shouldn't be accepted in our society. I think the only way we change people that we disagree with is by having uncomfortable conversations. So I think part of that is in these meetings, shoot, someone's saying something I really disagree with. Let's talk about that. Let's not avoid it. Let's not try to get around it. Let's not try to split up based on our identity groups or anything like that. Let's come together as one, focus on what we have in common, and then focus on those different voices and where we can come together.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to come back to a question that I asked Ben. How would you inform the student body about what is happening in the Senate?
I think my method of informing the student body on what is happening in Senate would be to create the online platforms of posting our agenda on social media handles that are connected to ASCSU, on our website, and physically within our office. Our office is already doing wonderful work in currently installing whiteboards so where any student can come in, pick up a marker, and write a bullet point that they want their student government to know is an issue that exists and needs to be addressed. And I think being able to further that effort that's already been in place by creating feedback systems where we work with the technology team to have a particular emails that go towards the colleges and have senators check those as a part of their office hours before they go into the Senate session for that week, and being able to inform themselves of a greater purview of what their constituents are requesting that they address before we go into Senate and before we address our agenda, I think is going to be the best way to focus on representing our students comprehensively rather than allowing senators to bring their own political beliefs into the Senate.
Thank you. All right, this is the last round of questions. And Ben, what are your closing remarks?
Yeah, I want people to know that I think both of us have a lot of good intentions with what we want to do. I think we have a lot of even similar philosophy in how executing that. I really just believe in caring for the students of this campus, and this is one of those moments where I just say, I would encourage you to vote no matter what, regardless of what candidate you're choosing. But we really have an opportunity on this campus to encourage compassion, to cultivate that compassion and caring for one another. I'm encouraging every single member of student government participate in community service or community engagement opportunity, because it's not enough to just talk about problems in the student chambers or in the Senate chambers. We have to actually go out there and be the ones who are solving those problems. I also think a lot of the times we focus in the Senate how different we are. We throw a lot of buzzwords like diversity, inclusion, representation on our campaign slogans. I want to tell y'all something. I am just focused on how similar we are. How much we have in common. Because if we want to solve problems in our Senate, we're going to have to focus on what we have in common, not what we have that's different from one another. It's important to celebrate our diversity, celebrate our differences, but at the end of the day, we come together on a bill and we say, what do we have in common? How can we help people today? That's how our Senate should be run this next year. I'd encourage you to vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the question is the same one. What are your closing remarks?
I think my closing remarks, I think I should start out with a quote by Malcolm X that says, "I am for truth no matter who tells it, and I am for justice no matter who it is for or against." And I think that is really how I've based my intention in my work as a senator, and how I will continue to base my intention potentially in my future roles in government, whether that be speaker or not. I think a question that I would want to pose to every person on our campus and every voter is really just do your research and look into your candidates and see who's doing the work on campus, who is creating the tangible programs, and who is most passionate. I think we all have really good intentions, but at the end of the day, it comes down to who is willing to put in the physical work and who is willing to produce the tangible solutions and programs and resources. And I think my biggest focus from here on out and from where I'm currently sitting and advocating for my constituents is really in the fact that I don't believe in creating a culture or an environment of equity, but rather an environment of justice, because justice focuses on gauging the support and the resources that are needed by communities that are marginalized and that are underserviced, and the cultures that exist on campus and the subcultures that exist. So being able to address that comprehensively, I think often requires us to create caucuses that belong to a particular identity. It requires us to focus on our differences and allow people the space to be able to do that. And sometimes we need to moderate that by understanding that we need an environment of free speech, but we will not have any tolerance for hate speech. And I think sometimes we need to dial back what we're worrying about as far as buzzwords and context and really look at what work is going on the ground, what tangible legislation has been produced, and what kind of effort we're giving back to our campus.
Thank you. That concludes the portion of the debate for the Speaker of the Senate. I ask that we'll be taking a 5-minute break as we get the president candidates up on the tables. Thank you for participating. Should we move down to 1:30? I feel like 2 is almost too long.
Works for me.
Perfect. How's it going? I'll check with Tyler, but I
Sit. Tristan, Kevin. You are delaying the departure of this debate.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, we'll get started. Welcome to the presidential part of this debate. The question and the formats will still be very similar to the Speaker of the Senate with one change. The questions response time will be 1:30. To start off, we're going to start off with a very general question that you will all receive, starting with Brust and Winchell. What do you want people to know about your campaign?
What I think comes with our campaign is I want people to know about Alec Brust and Marina Winchell, who we are as students and where we come from. One thing that has been consistent throughout this campaign is that we are the different campaign that has come from the outside of ASCSU. But we have come from the student body, and we are students just like everybody else. And so one thing that has remained constant in our campaign has been recognizing the student voice and pushing for that recognition within the ASCSU body from our outside opinions, coming from the Collegian, coming from RHA, and coming from different parts of campus as students. Marina?
I would like to say that I would argue that we never thought we were better than any other student due to our prior acknowledgments and engagements on college campuses, so.
Yeah, we're regular students and we come from different backgrounds, and we want to bring that out in our campaign, and we want to bring that out in our presidency, so.
Thank you. The question will be for Aubrey Roper, and that is the same question.
Well, I want people to know that we have a unique combination of passion and experience. Lindsay and I both know the things that we need to do to really make our role as president and vice president really effective. We know how to take the student voice and make those things happen. We have experience within the organization. Lindsay serves on SFRB, but other than that, she's not been super involved in ASCSU, so she has that outsider perspective as well. But we have that unique combination of experience, and we are both super passionate about what we do. I love CSU. CSU means the world to me. It has for my entire life. And so the opportunity to serve the students in this role, and the fact that we know what we need to do, and we can hit the ground running and be really effective at doing it, that's what makes us unique.
I think what also makes us extremely unique is just our passion for CSU as a whole, as well as our acknowledgement that we come from backgrounds and experiences and ideologies. We have our own identities, but we also recognize that we are here for the students and to make sure that they are heard. And so yes, we have these different backgrounds, but we also know that we need to surround ourselves with people who can have their voice, and we can make sure that that is heard.
Thank you. The next question will be to Epperson Hill. What do you want people to know about your campaign?
Very simple. It comes with our slogan. It's your ideas, our job, strengthen your voice. We see a lot of issues. We see a lot of people that represent ASCSU, and they're representing their personal agendas. While our platform is very important to us, and that's something we definitely want to do within ASCSU, we want to provide outreach to the students so they can come to us, we can solve their problems, and make a better CSU for them.
When it comes to ASCSU, there has been definitely a lack in transparency. A lot of times, if you go out to the average student, they have no idea what ASCSU does. They have no idea what their student fees are being paid on, and they are kind of sick of it, to be honest with you. So we want something to be very clear. What we will know is what you will know. We are here to represent you and you alone. The students of Colorado State have been ignored for far too long, and we will guarantee we are going to change that.
Thank you. And for Siren Sullivan, same question.
All right, thank you very much. The number one thing I want people to know about our campaign is that we are having so much fun. Everybody said that when you campaign with your best friend, you will not have a best friend by the end of this. And I don't hate Tristan yet, so I think things are going very well. But to be honest, well, that is honest. We started out a year ago, and he was my roommate at the ASCSU retreat, and we clicked like that. We both had a lot of views that we were like, I think these are some changes we need. And then we ended up working together on a lot of different venues, and our friendship is what made conflict not conflict. We looked at things from each other's perspective.
Also, the thing why we're running, what you need to know is we got to go to all the student organizations last semester, and we'd go and say, hey, this is what ASCSU is all about, and we had a ton of fun doing it. And then we'd get a list and say, hey, what do you want to see changed on campus? And we got this list going, we brought it to Senate, and nothing really happened. I brought it to the executive cabinet, and nothing really happened. And finally, him and I looked at each other and said, well, if we want to see it happen, if we're getting all the student input all the time, maybe we just need to do it ourselves, and that's why we're here. And it is the honor of my life to run with my best friend. I wake up with a smile, even though it's at like 6 in the morning to campaign. I still wake up with a smile. I go to sleep excited for the next day. You could not, and they'll tell you, your junior year, you found all your friends, you know who's gonna be there? No. Junior year, that's where you meet your best man at your wedding. That's where you meet, truly, someone who's gonna be one of the loves of your life. I absolutely adore Kevin Sullivan.
Thank you for that touching story, but I'm gonna have to cut you off. The next question is for Epperson Hill, and that is, what makes your campaign different or separate from others?
So I think what really separates us from all the other campaigns is how much Jake and I have been committed to the students' best interests at CSU. Since the beginning of our collegiate careers, Jake has worked tirelessly to advocate for FSL, for students all over campus. I've been a teaching assistant for 2 years now. I've been in the classroom. I've understood what's going on with people in their lives, what's their challenges they're facing, and what their academic success really depends upon. And that depends upon things like teaching assistants. That depends upon things like TILT. That depends upon, really making it a better place at CSU and improving their overall wellness as a CSU community. So I think what really separates us apart is we don't do this for any other reason besides service to our fellow students, and we will never change that. We're not in this for the money, we're not in this for the resume booster, we are in this specifically to give back to CSU.
Thank you. The next question is for Brust Winchell. Many students have no idea what ASCSU is or what they do. How will you reach students that have no involvement in ASCSU and engage with them?
Yes, I believe that our past experiences have really opened up a lot of places to reach the student voice. One of the tasks that I had to do as the opinion desk editor at the Collegian was I got letters from the community. And I've read those letters and I responded to those letters and we ran those letters. And so I've kind of been able to be receiving of the student voice in that sense. And I've been able to see all the places that people have strong voices. And the thing is, we have strong voices all over campus, but not many of those strong voices are realized and able to have a space in ASCSU to be empowered. And so I think that part of that is us being here and being recognizable, and we are going to be holding weekly office hours that people can come to us, and then also making sure that we go out to other people instead of just holding these office hours and making people come to us, making sure that we go to the areas of campus where people may not know where ASCSU is. And so, Marina, would you like to put a little input in there?
I think being recognizable and holding ourselves accountable that we are representing the students, so making them feel like they can come up to us and talk to us if they see us on the plaza or in class or anywhere, that we just want to be those president and vice president that are just normal students.
We want to hear your needs, and that's what we want to bring to ASCSU, is wanting to hear and listening.
Thank you. Next question is for Siren Sullivan. How do you anticipate increasing voter turnout for elections next year?
So I think it actually goes back to the last question. How do you plan on getting people involved in ASCSU? We always look at the problem incorrectly. We always say, how do we get more people? And we really market to ourselves, saying we need to get everybody to join us, and once they're there, we can fix the result. If you want more people to vote, if you want more people to get involved, start doing something. The second you start making a difference, the second people see cost of parking go down, the second people see tangible solutions to problems and they realize that that can be done, and they'll know it's this body that's doing it, and they'll vote because they know that this can see change. I think they've gone through a lot of elections with a lot of promises, and they're never fulfilled, and why would you vote? If time after time after time again you never see any change, why would you vote? I think the key to getting more people to vote, I think the key to getting more people involved is to not look at that as the outcome of what you want. Look at results, and that'll be a byproduct. More people will vote as a result.
There's nothing I can add to that. But actually, I thought of something funny. So there was a student government in the 70s, and nobody cared about what they did, so they elected a bag of popcorn. And, you know, if students don't see a reason to vote, they think that they're not doing anything, they'll elect a bag of popcorn. And personally, if I lost to a bag of popcorn, it might be funny, but students need to know that there is a reason to vote, and it's for the reasons that we're all here today, is we want to bring change to this campus.
Thank you. Next question would be for Aubrey Roper, and we're going to circle back to a question we asked at the start. What makes your campaign different or separate from others?
Well, I think simply the thing that really sets us apart from everybody else is our experience. Right now, Lindsay is the only vice presidential candidate who currently sits on the Student Fee Review Board, which is the board that the vice president has to chair. And she is beyond qualified to take on that role, and in a way that nobody else is. I've had the opportunity to serve in the ASCSU Senate for about 1.5 years, and in that time, I've written 2 pieces of legislation that I've seen have an impact. And I've seen how ASCSU is an amazing platform, if used correctly, to really help students and to make that student voice heard, not only on our own campus, but with the Board of Governors and to the entire state, even at the state capitol. So we can really affect change, and we know how to do it. We've seen how to do it. We have the experience to make this really effective.
I also want to touch on the fact that there is a difference between sitting on the outside of ASCSU and being educated about ASCSU. And I truly believe that, yes, I sit on the Student Fee Review Board, and last year I sat on the Board of Student Organization Funding. I had that experience on that side of ASCSU, but I've never held a director's position. I've never been on Senate. But I am educated about what ASCSU can do. And with that, I know what we are able to do and what we will do if elected.
Thank you. Next question is for Epperson Hill. At the start of this debate, you mentioned transparency. Improving transparency between ASCSU and the student body is a concern that is echoed throughout all of your campaigns. What does transparency mean to you?
Having something simple enough to relate to the students. You know, prior to this debate, we were given an entire packet of our controller books and all the different budgets, and I don't understand how a typical student can understand where their fees are going to. You know, we are fortunate enough that we've run fraternities and councils before where we understand these books and we know what these budgets look like, but the typical student is not going to be able to understand something like that. So we need to create a platform where we can be transparent, where they do understand where that happens and where they can find it, such as the website starting first.
I really think it's a shame how hard students have to work to realize what resources ASCSU has to offer and how hard they have to look and who they have to talk to. It's something as simple as Jake said, the website. It just doesn't work. You have no idea who represents you. You have no idea what issues are hot. You have no idea how to communicate your wishes to ASCSU. It starts with something like that. Just being able to talk to students, being able to go out there, social media campaigns, being on the plaza, something that they can really look forward to and know that they have constant communication with somebody like us and really understand how they can have their voices heard. That's what our campaign's all about, and that's what we promise to do.
It's not staying in an office, it's getting out on campus to find out where the real issues are.
Thank you. I'm going to take one brief moment for Epperson Hill. You mentioned that you said you have resources to offer. Can I ask a quick clarifying question? What resources do you have to offer for students?
So I currently have a personal relationship with the city manager of Fort Collins. And we've had constant conversations about what we can do to really improve the resources of ASCSU and the city of Fort Collins. And that starts with a constant conversation. That starts with having a really good relationship with the city of Fort Collins so that we can work towards a common goal. Other resources that we have to offer, being a teaching assistant, I realize what it's like to be in the classroom and to really understand, what the incentive is. I don't do it for the pay. We don't do it for any other reason besides we love helping students. And those are the resources that we really need to push. The TILT program, the teaching assistant programs, things that are going to advocate for students' academic success on campus. That's what they're here to do, and that's what they deserve, to have a overall good relationship with their CSU representatives and to really work hard at their academic success.
I think another thing resource-wise is our experience. A lot of campaigns say your experience will definitely hinder your performance in your job, and I say you're wrong. Carter made one of the best philanthropies that we've seen at CSU. I was a nationally recognized fraternity president. We also together achieved one of the most high-achieving chapters in the nation. We have that experience, we know what to do, and we know how to do it.
Thank you. Next question is for Aubrey Roper. Many students have no idea what ASCSU is or what they do. How will you reach students that have no involvement in ASCSU and engage with them?
Well, I think first of all, we have to recognize that there are a lot of opportunities we have that we haven't taken. And we're going to talk about transparency until we're blue in the face. Everybody's talking about it, and we do recognize it is a huge problem. The fact that we are a student government that really is ineffective at representing the students and performing our entire function in a lot of ways. We recognize that, but we've talked about that so much. We have said so many words. Lindsay and I have tangible ideas on what to do. We want to make sure, first of all, that about every month we're going to have open houses in the ASCSU office with free food. Bring people in, make sure that we can start those conversations, because we can't guarantee we're going to go out and be able to have conversations with everybody on the plaza, but if we create an opportunity for people to know where we're going to be and create an incentive for them to be there, even if it's just a little incentive, it's something that shows that we care about the students, we care to hear your voice, and we want to create an opportunity for you to voice your opinion and voice your needs to us.
Adding on to that, we've had the opportunity to speak to a lot of student groups here on campus, and with that, a lot of them have expressed their interest in maintaining that relationship, and we've also expressed that interest as well. And I think actually putting our money where the mouth is, like maintaining that, going and reaching students and those student organizations and carrying on that conversation beyond just a one-time deal.
Thank you. Aubrey Roper, I'm going to ask you a quick clarifying question. You mentioned free food as a way to engage students into ASCSU meetings. Well, I love free food. What are other ways that you're going to get engage students with ASCSU?
I mean, honestly, I think that's a great incentive. I do think that we need to do more like that to give students a reason to come talk to us, because honestly, I know that we can go to them and we can do as much as we can, but until we show students a little bit more that we care about them and we want to do something for them and say that it matters so much to us to hear your voice, that we're gonna do this, we're gonna create something for you, and we're gonna give you some value, I think we are not doing our job effectively, and that is a huge opportunity we have. If it's free food, if it's a fun event, something like that, we have a huge opportunity to provide students with greater value, use the money that we're receiving from them to provide them back with more value, and let them know that it's so important to us to hear their voice that we're willing to take all this time and effort to put that in.
Thank you. The next question is for Brust Winchell. What makes your campaign different or separate from others?
Well, I have touched on that Marina and I have very diverse experiences on campus that we would like to bring into ASCSU, that we are not in ASCSU, but let me talk a little bit about those experiences. So one thing that I have held paramount in my college experience is that I've had a singular goal, and that is to create discourse. And we've had that discourse through my desk at the Collegian. Arguably the most controversial desk at the Collegian. The Collegian people in here know what I'm talking about. And we were able to, at the end of the day, come together as a team and eat snacks together and have conversation together, despite this really underlying thing, which is that we were all very, very different. And so understanding that difference and understanding those people in this area where we can be a team and we can bring that into ASCSU as a different leadership, I think is a major thing that makes our campaign different. Marina?
I also believe we understand we're not perfect, and we're here to learn and go down this road and take this adventure as it comes.
Yeah, and even in the campaign, we have been learning so much about ourselves and about our own differences, and we are willing to, and we want to bring those differences into ASCSU as well.
Thank you. Next one is for Silent Sullivan. Of course, improving transparency between ASCSU and the student body is a concern for all of your parties. What does transparency mean to you?
So I think we overcomplicate this issue. When it comes to transparency, there's no secret files inside the office. We're not hiding anything. We're just kind of boring sometimes. All of our files you can access. You can come to any meeting you want. But the fact of the matter is we don't have ridiculous news all the time. So there's not an immediate interest in a headline. But that said, there's still more that we can be doing. I have pitched the idea with Tristan. We would love to have fireside chats where there's weekly videos where we kind of go over, this is some of the things that happened. Here's a place where you can comment on what you want to see changed. And also, we need to work with the collegian more. Sometimes they gather one quote after a Senate session from one senator, but I think there's a lot of senators who would love to share their ideas with the collegian too, so we could have a wider range of ideas. Anything else?
Yeah, a few things. I keep hearing about the website. No one ever addresses the real problem of the website. It's not that it's user-friendly, and it should be. There's a lot of work to be done on it. It's how do you get people to go to the website? No one's going on to Google saying, ASCSU, you can make it the most interactive website in the world. You could have direct messaging like Snapchat on it, and people still wouldn't go to it. You have to start doing things and incentivizing people to go to that. You need to do more things on the table. Ethan Vassar from the Collegian pointed out to me the other day that we haven't tweeted on our account in like 7 years. Let's get that up, not to be Trump-esque, but let's get our social media up. There's a platform that students use. I do not understand why we're so disconnected in that. Oh, and as far as transparency and
Sorry, I'm
accountability.
going to have to cut you off.
All right.
I'm going to ask a follow-up to that. You mentioned the collegian and improving communication with the collegian. How would you guys specifically improve more communication with the collegian?
You got to ask the question one last time a little louder. I'm deaf.
No problem. You mentioned in that last question that you want to increase transparency, you want to get more involved with the collegian. What does that specifically mean to you?
We got a negative article about us the other day. They used us as the source of why ASCSU isn't represented, or doesn't represent. We simply contacted the guy and we said, hey, what don't you like about us? Had a really civil conversation. Next day, he talked about how we need to improve our social media, something I've been advertising for a while now. I don't understand why we don't go and walk down and talk more often. I don't understand why we don't have press conferences to say, here's what we're doing. I don't understand why no one just writes a letter and says, here's what I did in the week. We have these weekly reports that are like 14 pages long from every senator. Why? Just walk down and have a conversation, write a letter, say, here's what we did this week. It's not that difficult. And I think the two organizations are constantly trashing each other. Maybe we need to look for once at the, today they sent a letter to every ASCSU member saying, you suck. And everybody got roused up, like, oh, I'm so mad at the collegian. Why not sit down and say, hey, maybe there's some validity to what they say. And maybe when we say something negative about them, maybe there's some validity to that. Maybe we can all reflect for 1 minute and say, someone's got a criticism of us, and there's a reason for that. So let's evaluate the criticism and find a solution. He's got something to say, too. Don't clap yet.
That's it.
Never mind.
Thank you. All right, Aubrey Roper, I'd like to ask a rebuttal to see your thoughts on the same questions with transparency.
I mean, I think as far as a lot of the transparency issues go, again, we can talk about this until we're blue in the face, and we have so many times. We can put it in the collegian, we can put it on the website, we can put it on Twitter, but at the end of the day, we are being, what are we being transparent about? Like, there's so many things that we need to be a little bit clearer about in our communication. There's so many things that honestly, a lot of the time we are being transparent about, like, if we were to be transparent, a lot of people would really wonder what we're doing and why we're doing like everything we do. We need to make sure that every dollar that's spent in ASCSU is spent more effectively for the students. We need to make sure all of the time we spend is spent more effectively for the students. Because right now, if we were to be transparent, it would be pretty uninteresting to a lot of the students, or they just get mad because a lot of the money that they put into ASCSU is not getting spent on them nearly as much as it should be.
I think it's also important to recognize that students are busy. Honestly, whether it's with academics, work, involvement on campus, changing the world, students are busy. And I mean, transparency is an issue, and it's not students' job to come to us. That information, yes, it's public, and it should be going to them.
Thank you. Next question is for Brust Winchell, and that is, of course, transparency, because that is a big issue. What does that mean to you?
I'm so sorry. Could you repeat the question, Ryan?
No problem. Transparency is a large issue that is echoed throughout all of your campaigns. What does transparency mean to you, and how are you going to improve that?
I think when we look at the word transparency, which is used a lot in all these conversations all the time, when we look at the word transparency, we have to think about it in a different lens when it comes to ASCSU. For instance, ASCSU has been surrounded by a lot of negative things, and we do need to be transparent about that, but we also need to be transparent about what ASCSU is here for, and that it is a learning institution. It is a misconception that I do not like ASCSU. I love ASCSU for what it is for, which is a learning institution, and I want it to be there for students to learn. And I think that in order for us to be fully transparent with the student body and with the ASCSU body, we have to recognize what ASCSU is here for and make sure that the nuance behind the conversation of ASCSU is not, yeah, it's the student governing body, but what does the ASCSU do? What do student fees go toward? What is ASCSU? What is this person standing in front of you telling you that they're a president? Like, what does that mean? And I think that goes with outreach and that goes with communication. And Marina, would you like to add to that?
I think high transparency also means a low factor of intimidation. I think ASCSU really intimidates a lot of students no matter what their age is here, and Alec and I really want to be those people that make ASCSU less intimidating and allow numerous people to come in and see what it stands for.
Yeah, and that goes for the people on campus that often ASCSU does not look at, such as grad students, such as first-year students in the dorms, RHA, other governing bodies that work at, not at ASCSU, at CSU, that ASCSU does not always recognize.
Thank you. I'd like a quick follow-up statement. You said ASCSU is intimidating in your eyes. Why is it intimidating, and how would you change that?
Share your personal experience there, Marina.
So my first year, I was very intrigued by ASCSU, and I thought I could really see myself there. And I strongly stand by that. ASCSU officials hold themselves to a higher standard, and not to say that's a bad thing, but I think that a lot of students who don't have a lot of self-confidence shy away from people who are like that. Granted that maybe that's just me, but I never saw myself in ASCSU. And to see myself here, I think, comes with a lot of growth, and I would really love for every student to grow in the way I did, because I know my first year I saw myself holding zero responsibilities because I just didn't have confidence, and all my leadership opportunities that I've had in the past 3 years have really boosted my self-confidence, and if I can share that experience or show my experience to 1 student or 100 students or 1,000 students, that would mean the world to me.
And I think us coming from the student body and really recognizing that we are here and we are learning is really important, because we are not going to hold ourselves higher than any student just because we're in ASCSU. Every single student has the ability to be in ASCSU. It's just about us being able to give that space and to empower students to have a space to have their loud voices heard. And that's what we're going to do if elected.
Thank you. The next question is for Epperson Hill. In the last question, you mentioned the Tilt building, and in your campaign, you specifically want to increase the funding of the Tilt building and student diversity offices. How are you planning to increase that without increasing student fees?
So currently, of the student fees the average full-time student pays on campus, $24.45 go to ASCSU. So what we want to do is use that money for those kinds of resources. Really advocating for the Tilt Center, advocating for those teaching assistant programs, offering incentives to teaching assistants, not just monetary, but also credit-wise and resume-wise, and just really encouraging people to be a teaching assistant to help their fellow students. But when it comes down to it, a lot of times the things that we're spending on aren't particularly important to the students of CSU. And I think we can all agree that we're here for our academic success. That's never going to hurt anybody, that's only going to help people. So that's what we're really going to try and advocate for, is taking those money and spending them on things that really are important to the students, in particular academics, in particular preventing against interpersonal violence, in particular really giving it back to what the students want and what the students need.
Nailed it on that one, that's all I got for you.
Thank you. The next question is for Siren Sullivan, and we're going to loop back to a question mentioned at the beginning. What makes your campaign different or separate from the other ones?
Yeah, I'll start out with that. We by far have the most experience out of anybody here. I've been in ASCSU for 3 or 4 years now. 3 years, actually. I haven't had my 4th yet. Chair of UFAB, Kevin is the Officer of Recruitment and Retention. He got more people in the Senate than they could fit actually in there. He exceeds everything he does. Everything he touches turns to gold. When we were up at the cabin retreat, he made a community out of this cabin in a matter of a few seconds. He can make anybody a friend. His smile takes up his face. I say that all the time. And I would go back to say, we kind of know what we're talking about when it comes to everything. You guys just mentioned allocation of the ASCSU fee to other things. I would challenge that a little bit. The vast majority of that goes to transfer, actually, to bus our students to campus back and forth. The rest of it goes to Grill of the Buffs, which is some of the most popular thing that we do as ASCSU. 23% does go to salaries, so there's a little cut there, but I don't think it would nearly compensate the Tilt building. So I give some of my time to say, where's this money coming from? Are you going to cut busing? Are you going to cut Grill of the Buffs?
Epperson Hill, you have the opportunity to rebuttal that statement.
It's very simple. It goes back to the transparency issues with our student fees. Little do a lot of students know, our wasted student fees just accrue. And the meeting I had with the SLICE advisors the other day, there's $250,000 of those dollars sitting there. That's where we find the money to reallocate.
And to answer your question, yes, we would cut from salaries, and yes, we would cut from Grill the Buffs. I mean, I'd rather have a terrific job because I got a terrific GPA rather than a Buffalo Burger the day we play CU. I mean, let's be honest here. I mean, those are the things that are really going to matter to students. I understand that it's a fun event, but what really matters to the students of CSU is the academic success. That is what they're here to do, and that's what we're going to be pushing for.
Thank you. Next question will be for Aubrey Roper. How will you anticipate increasing voter turnout for elections next school year?
I think the issue of voter turnout is obviously, getting people invested in ASCSU elections is a huge challenge because a lot of people, again, don't know what we do and don't care. So I think with that, first of all, making the voting system a little bit more upfront. I think if we can figure out a way to try and do that through Canvas, we can dramatically increase voter turnout. And additionally, I think we have a huge opportunity with that. Just again, if we make it something that's right in front of you all the time, that is a huge opportunity we have, and make it something that we can get more people invested in. I think also, again, going back to our earlier point, we have a great opportunity to next year create those open houses, create more opportunities for ASCSU, creating value for people, doing things for the students to really make them invested in ASCSU and understand why ASCSU can benefit them. And if we can do that effectively and openly, we will absolutely increase voter turnout because people will see what an effective administration can do for them and how their lives will improve.
Thank you. Before we move on, we have reached the halfway point, so we're going to take a short, brief break, and then in a few minutes, we'll be back asking more questions. Thank you.
turn in vertical?
No, Tony Prop. Yeah.
Do you see me like going crazy out there?
You're doing a great job. If you flash your
Please start taking your seats.
Can I talk to you after this?
We don't need these anymore except for food insecurities. Those were just answered questions. So, do you have this one?
You have 10 seconds to take your seats.
I also might just shake their hands and let them know they're all doing great. Cool. Just to be nice.
Yeah. Look at these dress windshield.
Where did the campaign go?
I'll go.
Did we lose half our campaigns? Okay. Cool.
Oh, that's not right now. No, that's not right now because she's not sitting here, but she's sitting here, so that's not on stage.
That looks really. Wait, let me see.
That's disgusting.
That was like, was that like 5 seconds before?
Oh my god, that is.
Look how stop. Stop. What was I eating? What was I doing? Oh my god.
Are people taking screenshots of?
No, it's just stop. It's just me and Hannah right in the middle of it. I'm so disinterested. Oh yeah, it's like delayed.
Where's Tristan and
See,
there?
look,
Cool.
that's us realizing we're on it. You look so like sad.
I'm like dead this year, so I have to.
What? Yeah.
There's tons of them.
Rattlesnakes everywhere.
You gotta bring it up, Carter.
Free promote the questions game.
We will work together on this one.
We're gonna be so awkward about this.
They just run
It's gonna be.
And then they're gonna post a smile.
What?
All right, everybody, there's a question about where to submit email questions, and that is at debatequestions18@gmail.com.
We haven't started doing audience questions yet, and we're going to start going into those now. That's based on just which questions kind of flow with what we're doing, and based on what the content of the questions are.
Of course. I'm going to start with this question. Is that all right? This question is for Brust Winchell, and this is a specific question from the audience. What experience have you had with the Student Fee Review Board that would prepare you to effectively run the board next year?
I would like to say I'm a very objective and unbiased person, and to hold a position with the Student Advisory Fee Board, I feel like you would have to lean on advisory staff and your peers. Yes, I don't have any experience as of now, but that does not mean that I can't learn or depend on anybody. I'd like to say I'm a fast learner, and this is something that I'm very passionate about, and student fees are essential, obviously, and yes.
And I'd like, sorry.
Yes.
I'd like to also elaborate on that. Marina, while she has not had experience on the Student Fee Review Board, but experience, you have to have experience in different places, and also what the vice presidency is acting as that unbiased person who can absorb the student opinion and then allocate those fees in the way that we see and deem fit for the rest of the students. And Marina, I've known her for a long time now, and I've seen her experience as an RA, and I've seen her experience interacting with students, and I know that she can be that unbiased and that objective person sitting on the Student Fee Review Board. Thank you.
Thank you. Talking about student fees, Epperson Hill, your campaign is planning to not raise student fees. How are you planning to prevent those increases?
So we're aware that there's certain parameters around with inflation and the raise of minimum wage. We understand that. But again, it goes back to what I mentioned before with that stockpile of money that's been just accrued over the years. We've talked to advisors, and they say, that's absolutely money you can use to subsidize those raises, and that's what we intend to do. There's no reason for our tuitions going up. There's no reason our student fees should be going up at that same rate.
And to further that point, there's a lot of things that we're spending that don't need to be that high. Specifically salaries. We are going to make it a priority to really target salaries and to lower them quite a bit, because that's going to save students money, and that's what we can use that money for, different resources, and really giving it back to the students and what they want to see with their ASCSU fines.
Thank you. Next question will be for Siren Sullivan. Specifically, student fees is not mentioned as one of your platforms. Why is that not one of your platforms?
It's common sense. People don't want to see fees go up. Duh. And we're not going to raise student fees. You have anything to say on that?
I mean, when it comes to student fees, the chair of the board does not make decisions. They appoint people to make decisions. It's ultimately up to them. But when it comes to our history with student fees, Tristan Siren was actually quoted in the Collegian. While chairing UFAB, he was asked if they would ever see an increase in student fees, and his response was never.
I've been chair of that board for 3 years. I've never even opened a discussion on raising the fee. I've actually had a discussion on lowering the fee. But I want to talk about a question that came up earlier about experience on the Student Fee Review Board towards Brust Winchell. You would be an excellent chair of the board. The most wonderful thing about the student government is that anybody can run for any position. I do not think you need experience for that board. I think you can learn over the summer. I think you could do an excellent job. This idea that you need to know something to do it, the most beautiful thing is that you can come in here and you can be a student and that you can get a job in the student government. So you would do a fantastic job, and if I lose to you, I'll shake your hand and tell you that. You would be a fantastic chair. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is for Aubrey Roper. Your campaign wants to keep student fees steady. Why should student fees stay the same?
Well, first of all, we recognize the fact that obviously we don't want student fees to increase, but we're also realistic in that we recognize that there are certain obligations that we have with our student fees that quite frankly, there's not much we can control. And there are a lot of things that, we are realistic in that we recognize the real picture of the budget. We've seen it. Lindsay's seen it being on SFRB. I've seen it being a part of ASCSU. We know what the budget really looks like, and we understand the fact that we can't just say we're going to lower student fees or we're going to, we can't promise that, and we are 100% committed to everything that we promise we're going to deliver on. We're not going to tell you something that we're not going to be able to do, and we're going to make sure that this happens.
I think going off of that, with the ASCSU student fee in particular, we plan to restructure the executive branch and the director's roles and make sure that those responsibilities are for the students and with like initiatives that students really want to see. And if there are responsibilities currently that are not being met or that aren't representing the students, that we are restructuring that so that the money is used effectively and efficiently, and with that, that will include not raising that student fee.
Thank you. Quick follow-up, you said that you want the student fees to be used effectively and efficiently. In your mind, what does that mean?
I mean, I think that means using every cent for the students and what programs and initiatives they want to see. And so when I say effectively and efficiently, in ASCSU right now, there is money and funds that aren't being used or that aren't being used for students' wants and needs. And so when I say efficiently and effectively, I mean actually hearing those voices and listening to them and using the fees for those programs.
And we recognize the money that students pay in student fees, that's their money. That's someone's money that either them or someone who has been supporting them on their educational journey, that's someone's real money that they have to pay. And so that should be an investment that they're making into themselves and the student body, and they're going to get a return on that. Being effective is about how well you accomplish a goal, and being efficient is making sure that that path from point A to point B is the shortest it can possibly be. And for this, we have great plans to make sure that with that, we are going to make sure every dollar that comes, every cent that comes into ASCSU is going to go the furthest distance it possibly can for the students.
Thank you. Next question is for Brust Winchell. What does representation look like to you, and how do you want to improve it?
I apologize again, Ryan. Could you just repeat the question? Sorry.
Of course. I'll speak up. Your campaign platform specifically mentioned representation. What does that look like to you, and how do you want to improve it?
Well, when we talk about representation, one thing I think that is really important is that, for instance, student senators, they need to represent the students from their respective colleges and from their respective groups and organizations around campus. But we also need to recognize the needs of the senators and give them incentive to actually represent these groups to the best of their ability. And Marina and I see a very great opportunity here that is actually a short-term goal of ours to work on over summer, and that is providing senators with internships through different colleges for their senatorship. So that would mean that they would sit on the Senate and they would have an internship. And we have been talking to Slice about this, and it is a feasible thing. And so I think that if we have positive incentives, and if we come from this place where we're working internally in ASCSU to provide these incentives for senators to be great representation, then we will find representation in ASCSU. We will see people in those seats, and the rest of campus can say, hey, we have people in these internships, we have incentive now, and we can represent people's needs. And Marina, would you like to?
I also, piggybacking off of that, I also think showing up to hall council meetings, diversity program meetings, seeing the needs of the students and what that looks like. We're not only here to represent student voices, but where was I going with that sentence? We are here to represent student voices no matter
where they come from.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that some groups on campus as well, such as RHA, grad students, people that don't necessarily fall under the budgetary and the finance things of ASCSU are often unrepresented. And so we want to make an effort to represent those groups. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is for Epperson Hill. This is an audience question. You've mentioned to students that you will advocate for free parking for students on campus next year. What mechanisms will you implement to make this a reality?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah. You've advocated for free parking for students on campus. What mechanisms will you use to implement to make this a reality?
Not really sure where free parking came from. Honestly, I don't see that as a feasible thing. Parking is very expensive to have. But in regards to the parking problem in general, in the Grand Master Plan like CSU has, they want to eradicate it by 2035 for sustainability. That's awesome, but we still need to advocate on behalf of our students. Cars aren't going to go anywhere, and we need parking on this campus. Therefore, we need to create actual, not more buildings, but cheaper parking stuff. It does not need to be a business any further. It needs to be a service.
Just like Epperson said, it's got to be something clear to our campaign is it's a service, not a business. When it comes down to our relationship with the city, that's going to be a huge benefit for us. It's going to be working with the city saying, all right, how can we expand parking? How can we expand the university's influence to the city of Fort Collins? And how can we work together for that common goal? Because it is a common goal. We want to have that good relationship so that we can really improve students' abilities to get to campus. And another thing that's really important to us that students have talked to us about being a problem is that parking tickets are not consistent. Sometimes they're $20, sometimes they're $35. That's a little ridiculous. If you get a parking ticket, it should be consistent throughout the entire campus.
And another thing going off parking tickets, unfortunately I've been ticketed multiple times, why I don't know, but I think a big thing is like the parking tickets, students, it's expensive to go to school here. A $300 parking ticket like I received is not feasible. We need to come up with something across the board that's affordable and not more than the city. It's a shame it's more than the city.
Thank you. Next question is for Siren Sullivan. How is your campaign planning to change parking?
First off, we're really happy that several of the other candidates have finally updated their platforms to include our parking platform. We were the only ones to start out with it. That's nice of everybody. As far as parking goes, first is make sure all the spots is full. It is our understanding that the health center parking lot is not at full utilization rate. I say it all the time. I've only taken one economics class in my entire life. Supply and demand. If something's not at full utilization, you bring that down. That way everybody can park. Second, there is profit in parking right now, and there shouldn't be. The school business already has 2-hour parking available. I think that should be implemented a little bit more. I think we need to look at the library parking lot and the LSC parking lot and say, how many students have one class a day? One class on Tuesday and Thursday. Why is there not 2-hour parking available on campus? Make it, and they did say it should be a service. Stop this for-profit nonsense. And finally, everybody around campus, it's mostly student housing. I do not understand why that's 2-hour parking. I live right there. If you want to park in front of my house all day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, go ahead. It's students. I really don't think we care. So I think there's some discussions with the city have there to make it so you can park around campus. There's discussions to have with Tony Frank to make it so you can park on campus. Right now, people are tuition's through the roof. Student fees are through the roof. We're squeezing dimes for everything. Food insecurities through the roof right now. People don't even know where they're going to eat. We need to make it so you can eat, you can park, and you can get to school.
I mean, the basic approach is be reasonable. Tony Frank has a master plan to get rid of parking, but if enough students vote in favor of us and our plan, he'll have to listen. And I think Tony Frank is a reasonable man.
Thank you. The next question is for, let's see, actually.
I think it's for us.
My bad. Next question is for Brust Winchell. How are your campaign's plans to improve parking different from Siren and Sullivan?
Ooh, okay. Yeah, and I will say Tristan does have a great platform, but we have not copied his parking plan, actually. We are really dedicated to getting into the parking situation and looking at it from an inside perspective so that we can actually make change there. So parking is a self-funded service. It's very expensive. I've actually calculated for myself, for my personal day, it is actually cheaper for me to pay to park every single day when I come to campus than it would be to buy a pass. And those are the things that are unethical that are happening within parking that really need to be communicated to the students. Once we get that discourse started, once we get that conversation about the parking ethics issues, then we can start to actually say, hey, here's a solution to combat this issue, instead of just saying, yeah, we can make 2-hour parking on campus. That is an excellent solution, but how is it feasible in terms of working alongside parking services? And so we need to really look into parking services. We need to look at the ethics within parking services, and we need to show students, hey, these are unethical practices. You are not guaranteed a spot, and then we need to work from there to find an actual solution that's actually going to work. Rena?
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we're done.
Thank you. Siren Sullivan, I'm going to give you the opportunity for a short 30-second rebuttal to those statements.
The statement's on point. From my understanding, I'd read the Collegian on the day everybody announced their candidacy. I read the article on you. I actually really enjoy reading the Collegian. And I looked at everybody's flyers on day one, and I didn't see parking anywhere on it. But I do know that a lot of times you don't put everything on the flyer, so I apologize if it was in the back of your head. Didn't mean to say something. I just didn't see it on any flyers anywhere.
Thank you. The next question will be for Aubrey Roper, and that is, food insecurity seems to be a large and broad issue echoed through the majority of campaigns. How are you planning to combat this issue during your year-long appointment?
Well, I think one of the things that I've been really fortunate to get to do is get to have some great conversations with current Deputy Director of Health, Lindsay Paricio, who is doing some amazing work on food insecurity and has really piloted a lot of great initiatives with that. And we recognize that right now we don't want to create anything new. We don't want to create redundancy because we see a lot of effort to create new programs all the time in ASCSU and a desire to do something new and big all the time. But we recognize right now the best thing we could do for that issue is to support existing initiatives. Right now there's mobile food banks, pocket pantries. I walk past a pocket pantry every day that as soon as they stock it, within 3 days, it's empty because people need that food. And so we recognize that need, and we recognize that there are programs on our campus already looking to deal with that issue. And they're working hard on that, but they need support. And we as student government, what better way could we spend the dollars coming in than advocating for students by making sure they all have access to food? They're all able to properly academically invest in themselves because they don't have to worry about where their next meal is coming from. That is absolutely the best way we could use our money right now.
I also want to touch on the fact that food insecurity isn't just not being able to find a meal. There's deeper rooted issues with that. And so on top of actually having food available for students, we also need to work on solving those deep rooted issues and working with the city and finding what is wrong with what the reasons for not being able to have food are and how we can better build those relationships to solve those issues.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a quick clarifying question for you. So you guys will only be in office for 1 year. Food insecurities is a large issue. Are you planning to hit the ground running with that topic first, or how are you planning to solve this issue within a year?
Well, I think one of the great things about the fact that I've been able to be around a lot of these programs is we understand, again, these programs, they go past ASCSU. Rams Against Hunger is through SLICE, Swipe Out Hunger. All of these programs, they go past ASCSU to the point where, or they're established programs and existing things that we can already support, and that's a big reason why we just want to put more support toward existing initiatives, because we recognize that if we try to start something new and big, that probably won't last. But we have an opportunity to really support those initiatives and to make sure that they have the proper support that they need to effectively do that, and we can do the best thing we can do with that by supporting them.
I also want to note that the executive branch of the student government is made up of more than just the president and vice president. There are directors as well, and with that, there's a team. And I think that, yes, that is one of the issues that we want to combat first. It's not the only one that we can. I think with a team, we can all work together and start, hit the ground running with multiple issues at the same time.
Thank you. Next question is for Epperson Hill, and it is the same one. Food insecurities is a large issue that is echoed through your campaign as well. How are you planning to combat that during your 1 year?
I think the first thing we start with is we partner with dining services. You know, little people know that people that are on these meal plans, they're given extra meat, like extra guest swipes. And you know, ASCSU wants to get involved with the actual Fort Collins community. Why not take those extra guest swipes and work with dining services to donate those to like the homeless populations we have or the organizations that are supporting them?
If I'm being honest, I grew up with a mother who is the biggest health freak, the biggest exercise freak you will ever kind of meet. And in the dining halls as they stand right now, it is extremely hard to eat healthy. And what we really need to focus on is how can we find an affordable way to create healthy options for students. It is possible. Through reallocation of fines, fees, you can make it happen. There are ways to do it. So that's really what it's going to come down to, is making sure that we have a healthier student body, healthier cognitively, healthier physically. And that's what it's really going to be advocating for, and making sure that we have a better overall experience here at CSU.
Thank you. Next question will be for Silent Sullivan, and it is the same one. How are you planning to combat this issue of food insecurities during your year-long presidency?
Well, one, we're already partnered with Dining and Services. We do the Swipe Out Hunger. That's one of the ways we fill our food pantry. So enhancing that partnership, and how we enhance that is most students don't know that there's a Swipe Out Hunger in the dorms. Even those who participate in it at the end of the year, most students still have swipes left over. So really marketing that, and maybe even directing the cabinet and some members of the Senate to say, hey, let's all go there at the week of finals and say, hey, did you know you can donate your swipes? I think that's the first thing to get that food pantry full. The second thing, we talk about allocations of funds all the time. I think the number was $240,000. You got to keep 25% of that. That's the student fee rule, is that in case our tuition drops, we need to have a 25% buffer. That's $100,000, $175,000 roughly left after that. That's only going to go so far. You're going to exhaust all your funds, so you need something that lasts more than a year. Partnering with the Denver Rescue Mission, I've reached out when I was director of campus engagement. Yesterday, in fact, I was down there serving. We go every other Tuesday with them when I was the director to do that. So I think partnering with them, and one, let people know that there's options. That needs to be marketed too. And I'd like to extend it a little bit. As far as adult learners and veterans on campus goes, we talk about food insecurity. We never talk about their kids. There's tons of students here that are food insecure and actually have families and children too. Our program should be extended to them. They should be marketed, and we should collaborate more.
Siren talks a lot really fast. So to sum that up, we have a new program that is working very well, and we need to expand it, whether that's increasing funding or reaching out with local organizations, and I think that we're going to find it's going to continue to grow.
Thank you. Next question is for Breast Winchell. All the other campaigns have listed that one of their platforms is food insecurities. You're the only candidate without that. How come?
Well, I do believe that food security is important. And I would just like to say, as my personal experience, I just have been blessed with the ability to have my parents pay for my tuition. And so I think that we need to recognize that there are students on this campus that are food insecure. And that's something that I have recognized and I have not been able to, see because of my own privileges. And I think that along with that, we need to really recognize those communities and go out and see what they need and how we can give that to them. And like we said, it is a great program that we have in place, and we are looking to expand upon that program so that we can reach the population of our students that does not have the amount of money to be food secure. And I think that that's a very important thing that we need to do for the Breast Winchell campaign. Marina?
I also believe that our campaign focuses more on bias-motivated incidents, and that is something that we need to be talking about as a campus and as an institution. Yes, food insecurity is a problem, but I think on campus, in proximity-wise, there are numerous other things that we can be tackling, like bias-motivated incidents. Being an RA, that was horrendous to witness my residents not feeling welcomed or loved on this campus, and I think that touched my heart a little bit more than food insecurity.
Thank you. The next question will be for Aubrey Roper. Your campaign wants to find a way to combat bias-motivated incidents on campus. What plans do you have to prevent these incidents and foster a supportive community across campus?
Well, I'm going to start off with calling them for what they are, acts of white supremacy. They are not bias-motivated incidents at all. To go off on that, it is also not the job of the victims to educate the privileged on these incidents. They shouldn't have to sit there and educate people on why these are wrong. Everyone knows that they are wrong. And with that, we really want to partner with programs that are just started, so peer educating. programs and making sure that, because I feel like students listen to students. And so if you have a peer-educated program where peers can go around and educate the campus on these acts of white supremacy and the impacts of that these have on the victims, as well as on biases and just different identities in general, I think it's going to go a long way. We also want to open up that conversation and partner with a lot of the diversity offices with different colleges, different campus, different involvements on campus, in order to open up that space for students to really be heard and have those conversations, because I think that's where that starts, is that education and awareness.
And honestly, a lot of it too is just being honest with ourselves about our campus culture. These things happen and they need to stop. And we need to recognize, first of all, Lindsay and I recognize the fact that because of our identities, we're not always the best people to talk about these things and we're not the most affected. And we recognize that we can reach out to more people and reach out to people who know more about these issues and how we can combat them better than we can and have the difficult self-reflective conversations that we need to.
Thank you. Next question is for Siren Sullivan. On college campuses across the country, the question of protecting First Amendment rights versus fostering a non-offensive environment is debated heavily. What is your stance on this issue?
I don't think the student government is going to be able, it's Colorado State University, is going to be able to change the constitutional amendments we have in place on a national level. I don't think we have that authority personally. I could be wrong, but that being said, I think I'm a history major, finance as well, and I think that sometimes we just need to sit there and say, why are things the way they are today? How could they be improved in the future? And as far as this cultural problem we have, I think Ben said it earlier, we're so eager to jump on people and say, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. Why can't we just say, all right, tell me everything you have to say. Let me hear it all, and then why do you believe what you believe? Here's what I believe, here's why I believe that it is, and I do think there's common ground. I think the point, there's a reason we're all at college, and it's to learn. It's to improve upon ourselves. Nobody's perfect. And I think the problem that we have in society is when someone says hateful things, we try to shun them into darkness. No, we need to show them the light. We need to educate them as to why they are wrong. If we all took the time to improve society a little bit, I think we could come to a better culture. I don't think we need to talk about getting rid of free speech. I think we need to talk about how we can improve society so everybody's on the same page.
I think some of the ways that we do this is with the campus. We bring a lot of speakers that bring a lot of insight students are very excited for. I know ASCSU has brought a lot of funding for that. And with CS Unity coming up, I think we have a lot to look forward to in terms of getting to know each other better.
Thank you. No, we do not.
Not even a little?
Next question is for Epperson Hill. How are you going to make sure students from marginalized backgrounds have their needs represented, considering there are many groups on campus creating a hostile environment?
So, touching on something that's very specific to us is something, the issue of interpersonal violence. Epperson Hill wants one thing to be very clear. Sexual assault happens on this campus, sexual assault is a problem on this campus, and sexual assault needs to stop now. There is no ands, ifs, buts about it. So what we are going to do to really focus on something specifically like interpersonal violence is focus on resources that are going to advocate for survivors and people who have fell victim to this kind of attack. Also, I think we really need to focus on what's going on at our registered events. So we want, in an ideal world, and what we're going to be pushing for is every registered event through the university will have a designated risk personnel who is sober and who can respond to situations if someone feels threatened, if someone feels in danger. Right now, of the student fees, $24.45 goes to ASCSU. $4.25 goes to help interpersonal violence reasons. That $4.25 is too low, it seems unfair to me, and it definitely seems unfair to all the men, women, and transgendered people who have experienced sexual assault on this campus and in their lifetime.
Thank you. The next question is for Brust Winchell. You mentioned creation of discourse as a part of your platform. What sort of discourse are you planning to implement in ASCSU, and in what manner?
So as I've mentioned, I was the desk editor at the opinion desk for the Rocky Mountain Collegian, and discourse was the biggest thing that we could have had that moved us forward. We talked about our issues, and when somebody had a different opinion, we talked about it. And I think that one of the things that was an issue last year is the fact that we had this rift between the exec board and the other governing bodies within ASCSU that really made things hard for us to get out the information to the students. Discourse is important because even if you have differing opinions, you can still get things done. And when differing opinions clash, that's when you don't get things done. Last year, all of the impeachment debacle really just threw things off. Students were not getting the media coverage that they needed from ASCSU because we were too busy covering the internal issue of the impeachment. We did not know what was going on with Ramride. We did not know what was going on with all the other legislative things within ASCSU. And so I think that if we bring discourse into ASCSU, we are going to combat a lot of those internal issues. And we need to start fundamentally with the people within ASCSU so that we can create better representation throughout campus and continue that discourse. Marina?
Worded perfectly.
Thank you. Next question is for Siren Sullivan. How will you fulfill your campaign promise of combating U+2 to make it more affordable and accessible for students, especially if the waiver is only available to certain households?
Thank you very much for the question. With U+2, so many campaigns promised to get rid of U+2, but what we thought was different about our promise is that we are merely trying to advertise a way to sort of bypass U+2. Now, you brought up the waivers, and it is limited in certain areas right now. There are a lot of obstacles with the city, but working with the city as a student government, we hope to bring some of the problems down, because it's well known that U+2 started a long time ago for reasons that have nothing to do with students, and I think the city is probably going to be reasonable when we talk to them and we show them data.
And to be more specific, you're talking about that certain households can't have it, that the waiver applies that if you have 3 people and there's 4 bedrooms, that's where it would apply, that you'd be able to get that 4th bedroom so you could have the 4th person. In houses that only have 3 bedrooms, I'm not sure if you want to share a room or not. If you did, I think that's the first step. You got to understand that this is a 1-year term. So the first step is marketing the waiver and making it so the houses with 4 rooms can have 4 people. Once that's a step and people realize that, hey, people have more money and can spend more money and students are happier, I think after that study comes out that's being funded by the student government on U+2 right now, then we can open up for the next step. We often have that big jump like, let's get rid of U+2. No. Let's make it so everybody who has 4 bedrooms can have 4 roommates. And then the next step, once the study is done and all that research is done, is to get rid of U+2. And Jason Sidoria came pretty close a few years ago. I think we can get that again.
Thank you. The next question is for Epperson Hill. Siren Sullivan mentioned talking with the city of Fort Collins. How are you going to improve relations with the government and the city of Fort Collins?
So just to kind of touch on things that have been said before, there have been a lot of claims in this campaign that you can bypass U+2. I spoke personally with the city manager of Fort Collins. He said that is not the option for CSU. He said that's not going to happen. So I think when it comes down to it, he was telling me about how there's going to be a study performed over the next 3 years analyzing U+2, how the city and the university are partnering to kind of see, where we're going to go from there. But when it comes down to partnering with the city, I think my personal relationship with the city manager is going to play out hugely. It's going to be really improving that communication and that transparency. He said that they meet with the ASCSU executive branch maybe once or twice a year. I would want to change that. I think me and Epperson would want to change that. We'd want to make it at least once a month, really making sure that we are on a correct basis and really working towards that common goal, understanding that we share this community with Fort Collins residents and university students. So I think it's really about advocating for a better understanding and a common goal, working with them, not against them.
Thank you. I'm going to offer a short 30-second rebuttal to Siren Sullivan.
Yeah, so when we were coming up with our platforms, I work at Student Legal Services. Most of the lawyers there, 25 plus years of experience. The first thing I did is say, hey, how's this U+2 thing work? And they said, hey, they actually told me that Jason Sidoriak came very, very close and was talking about relationships within the city. The people, one of them was actually a judge in the city, so they know everybody. And she told me the first thing is he got very close, and they told me about the waiver. It was them, and then they sent me like a 4-page packet on it, and she followed up with more and more. So when you're telling me this packet doesn't exist, let me forward you the email after this.
Thank you. Next one is for Aubrey Roper. What does institutional shared governance at CSU mean to you?
Well, I think it means recognizing that we are a cooperative entity and that we have a lot of different stakeholders on this campus and a lot of different stakeholders in this city. And I think that we need to recognize the fact that ASCSU is a student government that the administration has worked with us so much to give us the opportunity to advocate for the students and give us the platform to operate with the Board of Governors and so many other platforms. And I think we have been given that opportunity to use this platform really effectively for students. And I think we have a great opportunity to do that and to expand upon that going forward. But I think we really need to look at the different relationships we have and analyze those critically and look how we can build upon them.
Thank you. The next question is for Brust Winchell. Your campaign wants to increase accountability. How are you going to do that?
I believe, so one thing that, I'm going to jump on the quote train, one thing that my dad has always told me my entire life, he's a huge fisherman, but he tells me, you can sail to any destination you want, but if your ship is broken, you cannot sail to that destination. And so I think that fundamentally, we need to look at the fundamentals of ASCSU in order to create accountability. One of those things I said earlier is that positive incentives are important. Positive incentives culturally, positive incentives as just a friendly face, positive incentives as the internships that I mentioned, making senatorships also internships. And I think that will increase accountability. Starting with the fundamentals, fixing the broken ship is what we are going to do in our presidency. And that is starting with the ASCSU student body so that we can create accountability there. Marina?
I also think Alec and I are very people-oriented, and there isn't a lot of self-interest that comes into this position to us, and we would,
Yeah, we've had goals as students on campus that we've been pursuing. One of those things has been, for me, discourse. I had a talk show called Clash of Rams where I sat with someone who had very different ideologies than me, and we were able to talk about things. We were able to talk about our differences. And so I've carried on that goal throughout my entire collegiate career. And Marina has been in RA, she's been in, the residence halls. And we've been actively pursuing these goals. And so that's what we're going to bring to ASCSU. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is for Aubrey Roper. As someone who is heavily influenced in partisan politics and student groups such as Turning Point USA, how do you think you can articulately represent the beliefs and values of all students?
Colorado State University has meant so much to me for my entire life, and the fact that I have the opportunity to sit here and run for student body president of CSU is an honor that really words escape me, because this is something that I have dreamed of since I was in middle school. But I see this opportunity I am loyal to CSU and the Rams, and that is my #1 priority. And I recognize that in doing that, I have to make sure that everything, my own personal political beliefs, and everything that I might have been affiliated with, they have to take a back seat, because my job is to listen to every single student voice and recognize that every single student voice matters, and know how I can do everything to empower every single student voice on this campus. And I know that in this situation, I am choosing to serve every single student on this campus, and I have to put all of my own personal commitments ideologically on the back burner, because all I want is the opportunity to give to the students of this university, because CSU has given so much to me.
I think it's also important to recognize that yes, partisan politics and your beliefs will impact how you come to the table and what you say, but it's also important to recognize that as a campaign, we will surround ourselves with different voices and different ideologies, and I think that's really important to point out, as well as we are here for the Rams, and political ideologies don't necessarily have a huge place in terms of student voices and making sure
Sorry, I'm
that
going to have to cut you off. Thank you. Next question is for Siren Sullivan. What does institutional shared governance at CSU mean to you?
Institutional shared governance? Is that what you said?
Yes.
Could you clarify the question?
It's an audience
So the shared governance of ASCSU, the student body, and the administration, the faculty, how that all comes together would be referred to as institutional shared governance.
Oh, I gotcha. All right. As far as what it means to me, it's important. It's kind of a checks and balance above ASCSU, and I'd go a little bit farther than just the administration ASCSU. There's IFC, there's RHA, there's a lot of governing bodies on campus right now, and what it means to me is actually an opportunity, because they're not always going to speak the same voice, but I've said this on a few times on our campaign trail, is that the students speak loudly when we collaborate amongst those governing bodies. If we want to see change on campus, we need to make sure Panhellenic, IFC, MGC, RHA, ASCSU, all pass the same things at the same time. That way, when it does get to the administration, they hear it crystal clear. I think there's too many times when the student government passes something, and we think we're the voice of the students. That's what everything says. But there's other people out there. There's other people super committed to RHA, super committed to IFC, and we need to work with them as well. So as far as shared governance goes, we need to understand that we are not this almighty God that everybody needs to listen to and have all the say in the world. We need to understand that there's other people out there with passions as well, and we should listen to them.
That's all.
Thank you. The next question is for Epperson Hill. Your campaign wants to take a stance on social injustice at CSU. How are you going to support the students, faculty, and staff affected by these incidents?
It's starting with the diversity of thought. You know, we need to create an environment where everyone's welcome to open up dialogue, no matter what the viewpoints may be. And that's something we definitely need to push, because without having that open dialogue and be able to collaborate together, nothing can get accomplished. One sole person or one sole organization or one sole governing body, they can't do it by themselves. You know, I agree with Tristan over here. You do have to collaborate with other governing bodies, so you can do stuff like that.
And Jake and I have been political science majors our entire careers, so really what it stems down to is not only accepting other people's opinions, but embracing other people's opinions. There is so much that we have to learn, that we have to offer by just sitting down and listening, opening that dialogue, and really just hearing what other people have to say, people that come from all sorts of different backgrounds, all sorts of different ideologies, and just embracing that and understanding where they're coming from and working as hard as we possibly can to make it better.
Thank you. This will be our last round of questions before closing statements. We're going to start with Brust Winchell. Your campaign emphasizes encouraging diversity of thought in ASCSU on campus. And how do you intend to do this in your role in the executive branch?
In the executive branch, I believe, well, first of all, I just want to say something about the executive branch, something about the presidency at its core, is that the presidency basically has one job, and the rest of it is up to us to see how we can deem fit. And that is to be a liaison for the other governances in Colorado, for the students, for Tony Frank, for all that. And I think that my and Marina's experience prior to this, well, experience has been a buzzword today, but our experience prior to this has really opened up a channel for us to bring diversity back into ASCSU. These senator internships, for example, are going to provide an incentive for some students to come and share their diverse voice, because some students on campus cannot come and have an unpaid senatorship. They just don't have the time. They don't have the resources, and they have to work jobs. They have to go and do their homework. And so I think that in diversity of thought means reaching out to these populations within the student body that have not been heard before. And Marina and I have been trying to do that our entire time here at CSU, and so we are going to continue to do that in ASCSU. Marina, do you have anything to add?
I would also like to add that we are, even now, hoping that we are empowering people to step out of their comfort zone, and with that, kind of lead into the diversity of thought process. So, yeah.
Thank you. Next question is for Siren Sullivan. Your campaign has mentioned the creation of a bartering app to facilitate affordable student exchanges of textbooks and furniture. How do you intend to develop, implement, and promote this while also fulfilling your duties of the office?
Yeah, so there's a new position called the Director of Innovation and Technology. His #1 task will be the development of this app. There's people on the university who are geniuses with this, like Jason Hewitt. Additionally, there's an entire building dedicated to computer science, and there's a lot of people looking for experience. So I will talk to those students, go to all those classrooms. There are millions of apps in this world. I think we can create one. And the purpose of it is it started with textbooks and went a little bit farther. I think when you're leaving your senior year, I think you have a lot of furniture, if you're moving to Seattle, let's say, that you want to get rid of. I learned that Rams take care of Rams. People want to give that stuff away. So you could throw it on the app. That way, a freshman could get it when they're moving in for their sophomore year. I think that if you have a chemistry class and I have a philosophy class and we're taking each other's classes next semester, you should be able to trade it. I think so much we put everything to $1, but students are trying to look after each other. If we want a tangible way of lowering the cost, we make a bartering app so we could trade stuff that we already have to each other. Textbooks, couches, whatever it is. If you're looking for a subleaser, again, I work at Student Legal Services, people are looking for them all the time, you should be able to put that on. So I think it's just an information app.
And there are a lot of uses for the app, and again, I think students feel comfortable working with other students on this issue, and ultimately it's not too hard to make an app when you utilize the resources around you.
Thank you. The next question is for Epperson Hill. How will you use ASCSU's lobbyists to advocate for students on the local, state, and federal levels?
Again, it's reaching out to the students. It's not sitting in office. It's getting out into actual campus, meeting with different orgs, meeting with different colleges and the community as a whole. And with that, you need to collaborate all those ideas, bring them back, sit down with the lobbyists and strategic groups, and come up with a common ground policy based on what all these different orgs said. And that's how you go about it in representing our students' needs on those different government levels.
Really, it's about reaching out to the diversity of students and hearing from them and then bringing it to the next level, higher and higher and higher. And really, it's what Epperson and I have really been trying to advocate for is specific spots for specific groups on campus, making sure that representation is fair and it is equal, making sure that it's not just one type of person in ASCSU. It's from a whole variety of clubs, whole variety of different places, different backgrounds, everything. That's what we're really going to be advocating for, is really a more equal, diverse student body.
Thank you. The last question is for Aubrey Roper. How will you improve ASCSU's relations with groups across campus?
Well, I think right now, being on the campaign trail has given us some great perspective on how many student organizations there are on this campus and how little often all of them hear from ASCSU. And the fact that oftentimes we go to these organizations and they don't know why they should care that we're coming to talk to them because they never hear from ASCSU, they don't know how we can help them, and they don't understand what resources we have at our disposal. And oftentimes, we don't have the opportunity to have the conversations with them to understand adequately what we can do to help them. Yesterday, I got to go talk with some student-athlete leaders, and we also recognize that there are a lot of groups on this campus that we just don't reach out to enough. And a lot of students we forget that we represent. And I think the fact that we have this perspective now, I know that I'm tirelessly going to work once we get elected to make sure that every single student org hears from us multiple times and is constantly hearing, how can we help you? How can we give to you? How can we add value to your student experience?
Going off of that, I think ASCSU is in a unique position where they do represent the student voices, and that's all of the student voices on campus. And with that, sitting so close to the SLICE office, they have access to all the student organizations, and I think that's a unique position and partnership that can be seen out of that.
Thank you. That was the last round of questions, and we're going to move into closing remarks, which will be 30 seconds long, starting with Siren Sullivan.
You've heard our platforms before. We're interested in parking, U+2, and course registration and evaluations, but I'd like to sum up with the fact that I am extremely honored that I get to run with my best friend, Tristan Siren. I would not be in the exact same situation that I am right now with Senate leadership, the various councils, without him, honestly. And some of the best days of my life I've had with him, some of the worst times, he's been there for me.
Kevin's my best friend as well. Every time my boyfriend breaks up with me, it's him I cry to. Every time we get back together, it's him who tells me to raise my standards. There was a few months ago where I was walking to the plaza, and I tell the story a lot. There was a guy holding a sign that said, "God hates faggots."
Thank you, but I do have to cut you off.
Oh, all right.
Would have loved to hear the story, though. Epperson Hill, you're next with the same question. 30 seconds for closing remarks.
So I'm going to brag on this guy just for a little bit. This man, I've worked with him my entire collegiate career. He is an absolute machine, and that's what this university needs. Someone who's going to stand up for students, someone who's not going to crack under pressure, somebody who's going to fight the good fight. This university deserves a machine. This university deserves Jacob Epperson as their next president of ASCSU.
Thank you. Aubrey Roper, same question, 30 seconds.
I love CSU, and I love the fact that we have a culture of support. My mom graduated from CSU in 1988, and the fact that she was so supported on her educational journey is why I can sit here today. And the fact that so many people here at CSU have supported me, that's what inspired us to do what we do.
I think going off of that, I think there's just a lot of passion that we have, and yes, our platforms have been out there, and we have been talking a lot about them and what we want to do for campus, and I think it's just important to say that we are here to represent the students and make sure their voices are heard.
Thank you. Rush Winchell, closing statements, 30 seconds.
I'd just like to say, I love ASCSU as a learning body. And there's been a lot of talk of change, and I just want to say, we can be that change. We are diverse, and we have these experiences as strong and empowered women on campus, and we have been sharing these opinions for our entire collegiate careers up to this point. And now we want to use this opportunity to give students that space. And we are going to do everything that we can do to give students that space to have their voices heard.
We also ask for trust. It doesn't take ASCSU experience to be a decent, kind, caring, loving person to everybody on this campus, and we'd love to be those people.
Thank you.
Trust.
With that, that concludes the 2018 ASCSU debate. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan. That was fun.